always going to be a need.
Sorry.
When there's a conflict between submissions in a version control system, there's always going to be a need for a negotiation between the people who are doing the two conflicting submissions. So it's negotiation is key, and you have to communicate with the other people. It's until we get artificial intelligence ruling us, it's always going to be a conversation between two people or more.
Yeah, usually I find that like the vast majority of cases, so what's a merge conflict? Basically, it's what if two people edit the same file at the same time, right? And this usually is not the world's most common problem, because let's say if you're working on a coding project, a lot of the files, you're responsible for this script or that's responsible for that script. But then there's some, let's just say like a package.json file or a pom.xml file. So what those are is, package.json file is a manifest of all the dependencies. So if I'm building a JavaScript server, like a node.js function, whatever, something like that, a React application, it's going to have some files with my code, and in the root of the repository, it'll have a file called package.json, and that will have a list of all the different dependencies that are in my various code files in that repository, right? So that package.json might be an example of a file that, I'm doing my code file, somebody else is doing their code file. They're two separate code files, and so we're fine. No conflict. But we each need to go enter a line that says, in the package.json, for my file, I will need to put a list. It will need this dependency. There's a central list of all the dependencies for all the files in that project, right? So and so the conflict that would happen is typically very, very easy to figure out. It's simply like, oh, well, when I entered it, there was nothing on line 1, so I put my line on line 1, and that was it. At the same time, someone else was doing it at the same exact time, and they saw a separate copy on their downloaded version of the repository and said, oh, there was nothing on line 1, so I put it on line 1, and now you end up with 2 lines. In that case, it doesn't usually matter which one is line 1 and which one is line 2. There's not really any difference. It's just the system doesn't know. It can't figure out. It just says, oh, both people put something on line 1. They both submitted it, and now there's something on line 1. And this is not, you don't have to know much about code to know this, right? Like we go into something like Google Docs, and it's really nice that you can see different people editing different lines, because otherwise, if you were editing 2 separate copies and tried to bring it together, how do you merge that, right? And so that's essentially what I'm talking about. It's usually very, simple things. So if you happen to have edited the same file that someone else had edited at the same time, and you submit it up to, and I look to, when I go to approve it, it's usually very easy for me to figure out. Now, as you mentioned, Rick, there are, as you get into more and more advanced cases, sometimes it can require, talking, like if 2 people were to, let's say that 2 people were to look at this guide, and they said, oh, I don't like this section, I'm going to change this section. And 2 people did that at the same exact time separately, and they both wrote essentially the same paragraph in different words. Then it's like, ooh, I see 2 people, that's a very rare thing, but that one can get, it can get more complicated, but 99% of the time they don't happen. And then of the time that they do have, especially with good, just basic hygiene practices, then when conflicts do happen, they're usually pretty easy to figure out and resolve really quickly. Interesting. So yeah. So anyways, so we had made a change here. We downloaded this repository and reviewing these awesome improvements that Steve submitted, and we found that there was one link here that the link was wrong. So we got the link working correctly, and we've saved it in our local file. Now we want to get that back up onto the main repository. So I'm going to, first I'm going to show you, so I'm in a fork, right? So if I do git remote -v, it's going to tell me that what this clone that I'm working on is based on the copy that's in a fuel. This is my personal copy of this repository. So this is the source repository. I've made it a copy for me to submit my edits on using that fork process. And if I do this command git remote v, it'll tell me real quickly, am I in a fork? Am I in just a direct clone of a repository? So what I want to do when I fetch, I want to get the source. So I'm going to say git fetch upstream And if I just do upstream, that'll grab the whole repository. I don't need to grab everything because we're going to rebuild the GitHub pages branches. Other branches aren't significant. So I'm just going to grab the main branch. So now I've got that. Now I want to do, different people have different opinions on this, but I typically do git rebase. Now, if I do git rebase, that's kind of like, a merge, type of merge. And it's going to apply this to the branch that I'm in. So right now I'm in the main branch. So if I do git branch, I think, is that some branch I'm on? So I'm on the main branch. Now, normally if I was on the actual source repository, I would never do this on the main branch. I'm on my own fork. Now, there's different opinions on this. Some people some people will make updates on a branch other than the main branch, even if they're on a fork. Maybe a good practice. I'm not going to get into that religion. I'm not going to say that I know the best way, but what I will say is, I think if you're on a actual clone of the main repository, and if you're going to make direct edits, you should probably always be doing them on a branch. However, if you're making a fork, as we have here, I think, there's some flexibility there. You don't necessarily have to add a bunch of branching to be making relatively simple changes. So I'm just make this change. So if I were to do a git merge or a git rebase or anything like that, it's going to merge the files into this main branch, right? If I wanted to make a different branch and merge things in. So when you're merging things, it's going to be relative to the branch that you're navigated into, right? So now I'm going to do git rebase upstream, and it's smart enough to know that it's going to want me to do main, but I like to be explicit. Cannot rebase. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Before you rebase. So first I fetched, right? But then I need to commit before I rebase. And let's see. Oh, I didn't add them. Gosh. See, normally this is like a bicycle ride for me. I do it. You do the same exact repetitive process so often they become like you don't even think about them. But then sometimes you get on a call and you're like talking to people and trying to explain things, and that throws you off a little bit. So yeah, so I didn't add them. So first git add dot. Yeah, now they're added, and now I'll commit them. And then after the commit, so now they're committed locally. What did that say? Oh, I did not have my git local. That's something must have been corrupted locally, because I've made plenty of git changes locally, and now it's saying that it doesn't have my username. So I need to add this, but that's probably has something to do with, there's something happened on my computer, because that's weird. That doesn't usually happen. Oh, wait, committer a fuel. Your name and email address are configured automatically based on username and host name. Please check the accurate. Okay. Well, looks like it did the right thing anyways. So I think we're good. And so we added them. Now I'll do the rebase. So I know this is like already new to a lot of people. And the fact that that was just that little discontinuity probably made it a little bit less clear. It's unfortunate. Sorry about that. So normally, like as soon as it's a very simple process for me. I make the change, I hit save, then you do git add, git commit, and make those commits locally until you push it up. It's not going to push anything else. And then once you've committed everything locally, then you do the fetch and rebase. That makes sure that your local updates can be synchronized with any other potentially pending updates. There usually won't be any, but it's just a little safety check, right? To do that, the rebase. Right. And so we're up to date. And so now once I know they're up to date, now I can get push. And remember, I'm pushing this to my fork, right? Because we're working on my fork of the copy. So this isn't a bad thing that I'm pushing here. And so I made the change. Now I go over to my fork of the repository. So back to my fork. So if you're not sure if you had a fork, or if you didn't remember exactly your fork, or if you go back to the main repository, right, and you click on forks, it's going to tell you, oh, you've already forked this repository, and you just click on the link, right? And I should see now that. Okay, so I can see here that this branch is one commit ahead of Modern Apps Ninja main. And I can click contribute, open pull request. create pull request, updating directory link, create pull request. Now the pull request is open. Notice, yeah, I'm no longer on that A fuel branch. I am not, or on a fuel fork, excuse me. I'm now on the main repository, and I'm looking at this, and you may not see the ability to merge if you're not an administrator on this. It'll just say something else, and you'll have to wait. But now, one thing to note is if you do have a pull request on any site other than the homepage, do try to reach out to me directly. I'm trying, like, my initial plan, I do want to build like an alerting and centralization, dashboard system. So across all of our, like, we have hundreds of sites, right? We can see everything centrally very clearly. I haven't built all that yet. And like kind of in the meantime, what I do have is I do have this GitHub notifications panel. And so I thought, hey, I can use the notifications when somebody does something, I'll be able to see it in notifications. Problem for me is that I'm subscribed to notifications for probably thousands of pages now. And so it's become a bit unmanageable. And sometimes if someone does a pull request on one of these pages, I may not see it. And so if you do have a pull request, if you wouldn't mind, ping me on, on Slack, on VMware Cloud Slack, a direct email, LinkedIn, stuff like that would be very helpful to make sure that I see these and get them approved for you. And then we'll go ahead and merge this pull request and confirm merge. And that's merged, and it will run a build process. We were reading that earlier. Once you make that change and save it, it will GitHub Actions is automatically going to run, and I have it set to run this Hugo build and deploy workflow here, where it will identify that there's new content and rebuild the updated HTML with that link that we changed. And so that is a very quick run through of the more complex development process, right? The simple thing is very, very simple. Like if I see a change, I click edit this page, right? I make the change, and then in that process, it's just click, 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 and it gets submitted. The interesting thing is, right, when you do this through the web browser, that whole forking and all that other stuff, it all still happens. It just happens transparently. I can make a change here now, right, and just add an extra space to the end of this line, and see, I'm an admin, so you won't even have the commit, but let's see, because I'm an admin, it would do this new branch. But if I wasn't an admin, you just click and it will, and you click like 2 or 3 times. You don't have to go do anything. You just say click propose changes, click, click, and then it will all behind the scenes go do the whole forking thing and open the pull request. It's literally just click, 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 and you'll submit changes when you do it through the browser. And if you need to do something more, bigger change, and you want to test it before you submit it, that's when you clone down the repository, type in Hugo server, and it'll just pop up the locally running version of the web page, and you can check your updates before you submit them. So sorry for those who are joining. I know we kind of rolled into that very abruptly over the top of the hour, as in the way we have the call structured. We have a little open office hours for any open questions. And then we handle those questions and then roll into the main hour at 8 o'clock. And it worked out well where we had a question in that first half hour about how to do this, and that kind of rolled us into a good place to kind of do a quick review of that process right as the 8 o'clock hour had started. So thank you everybody for joining. So we did that review of that process, and I wanted to talk a little bit about planning, but before I do that, let me pause. I've been talking for a while. This is a very conversational, interactive forum, so please feel free to, if you have any questions, comments, anything you'd like me to review, anything like that, if you're on the call, or if you just want to say hi, you're more than welcome, and can keep it conversational. Anytime I'm presenting, always feel free to shout out, chime in. Cool. So I'm just going to keep rolling, but again, don't hesitate to shout out at any point if you have any questions about anything. So yeah, I wanted to talk today about planning, because it's always hard for me to do planning, because like there's, yeah, I mean, it's not just hard for me. There's a lot of interesting things about this project that make planning interesting. You know, one of them is this is sort of a best effort project, right? It's kind of a side project that's become a real project, but at the same time, we don't have dedicated development resources or necessarily dedicated people. And we have potentially volunteer contributions. And so on one hand, everything that we plan for, we can't plan for things like very concretely, like by X date, we're going to have X feature, because, you know that we don't have dedicated, this is a best effort project. And so it just depends on how much time I have. And any week I could have something where it's like, okay, well, your day job needs you to do this. And I mean, I guess this is part of my day job, but it's also, yeah, I have you know what I mean, the other work concerns that come up that take priority over this. And so it's hard for me to commit to a very specific list of features. At the same time, if I come up with a list of features that's like, this is first, that's second, we should do that third, we also don't want to do that either, because on one hand, we have a lot of potential volunteers, right? And if someone potentially wants to volunteer for something that's not the first thing in the priority list, well, I'm going to say no. No, of course we're going to say yes, right? And likewise, it's a good thing to capacity to have when you're planning projects in any case, because, let's say you have the most urgent feature that you're working on, and that requires one particular specialist to work on that feature. In the meantime, you have other people who could also be contributing to other feature requests or bug resolutions or other things like that, content needs. And why would we make them wait because what they're working on isn't as high of a priority, because they can't work on the higher priority thing. So it's just managing these type of priorities. And then of course, there's just the headwinds of the ecosystem as a whole. But let's talk about where we're at and where we're going and the order by which I think we should go there. And so currently, if I go to our homepage, I think, we have sort of a lightweight learning management system here that's been put in place, and it's very hacked together. I would consider this to be like a 0.1/alpha/, I mean, I don't even know if alpha is appropriate. It's like it's basically a production prototype, truthfully, right? But it works really well. And it's one of the nice things about, some of this modern software, whether or not someone might release something where the features are built, with a code quality that is, prototype level, that's up to you, right? Depending on the nature of your initiative, you may want to have an extremely high code quality before you release anything. One of the cool benefits of cloud native tech and CICD and stuff like that is you can get something out there and working and evolve the software as you go. I think that was a lot harder in the paradigm of waterfall development, where releases were very periodic and so on. It's like we can change things every day, and we do change things every day. We run all of this stuff is on a full continuous deployment life cycle. Now, it's not continuous deployment done right per se, right? Because if you really want to have a great deal of assurance before you cross that bridge, you should have everything with automated testing and so on. And that's why I consider this a production prototype. It works well. There are very few problems, surprisingly. But there isn't, like, when I make a change, it doesn't go through some very nice automated testing and validation sequence behind the scenes and then make the change. Nope, it just makes the change. So hopefully we know what we're doing. It's a little, cowboy, if you will, but it works. But that was the intent of this, is to get the initial functionality out there and working, and then improve it as we go as part of our learning experience. But one of the big challenges with that approach of of building as you go is if you build, one of the hard things to do with technology is, let's say you build something, it works, it's working fine. You know that it is inefficient and the code needs to be optimized for various reasons. But then you've got to go back in and refactor code for a feature that's already there instead of working on the next feature, which is always painful. But at some point you kind of need to do it, because I think where we're at right now is adding additional new features has a lot more complexity, because the features that we have right now are they're not written around a cohesive set of functions, right? They're just long scripts, and we really need to take the code and to get it to that don't repeat yourself principle, and to make it more functional programs rather than just scripts. Because at some point you realize it's like, okay, well, I want to add this feature. To do that, it's not I may have a number of functions that already exist that I need to do the same thing to get the next feature working. Call an existing function or do something very like, if you consider the services that we have running right now, what do we have here? We have this registration. So I can go and click in here, and it's going to say, here's how I submit this form. Submit this form in an issue ticket. And when you submit this issue ticket, it's going to trigger an automation. And that automation is going to call GitHub's API, and GitHub's API is going to send you an email. And then once you send an email, then and that's actually the end of the first part of the member registration process. And that function ends there, and it starts a new thing where has a server that waits for you to accept your invitation to join the GitHub organization. When you accept the invitation to join the GitHub organization, there's a web server that I have running on Azure that receives an API call that then triggers another GitHub action that builds a member page for you, right? So this is what I mean by features. We need to go, but we go look through those workflows that do that. So if I go to the home page here and I go into GitHub and I go into workflows. So this is that workflow: new issue ticket event and org member change event. Those are essentially the two, let's say for lack of a better term, functions or workflows, two workflows that handle the process of registering a new member. And then there's workflows like this on every one of the member pages that handle various different things. How do I take a test? How do I enroll in a course? How do I do those other things? Well, there's a lot of repetitive stuff that we need to do in these scripts. Right? I need to, grab a file from GitHub. I need to process a file a certain way. There's a lot of repetitive stuff that could be placed into functions. This one's only 200 lines, fortunately, but a lot of these are, a lot of these lines are a lot longer. We have 500,000 line scripts, and they don't need to be. Right? Like if we did the whole don't repeat yourself thing and made functions for everything and called functions properly and just did proper programming of this stuff, or even really clean scripting. It doesn't even need to be proper programming per se, but just clean, appropriately well-designed scripts. We would, then when we come to do the next one and it repeats something, I can call a well-designed functional interface. Like right now, almost every time I make a new function, when I'm going to create a new GitHub action workflow and I start to do it, I'm like, oh, well, there's stuff that I've already done in the other workflows that I need to do in here too. But because it's convoluted and not parameterized and unclean, it becomes a really big ordeal. Okay, I've got to go look through this 600 line script and find this particular section that has a similar thing to what I'm trying to do in this new feature. But because I didn't parameterize it and it's not running it as a function, I've got all types of calls and data that's unique to the way that I'm, essentially implementing, say, a curl of a web page here, and have all that data mixed in instead of cleanly separating out as a function. Now, when I want to add something new on, it's lot more mental burden. It's more now if on the first script that I have, if I had made, say, a function, here's a function on how to pull a file down or scrub a file a certain way or process this or that a certain way, and have it clean input parameters, and just called that function. Then I would get rid of these 500-line scripts that are hard to go through and hard to reason about. So they'd be much shorter. And then also, when it called a function, it would be doing it in a sane and coherent way. So that way, when I needed to repeat that similar functionality in a new feature that I'm trying to build, I can just call that functional code in a very clean and organized way. And so on one hand, we've had this chicken and egg now where there's a whole bunch of new features I would love to add. Like the amount of features that I would love to add is just, I have an infinite appetite for new stuff that I would love to do. But then you're gonna have to take a step back, clean these up and really make them clean. And one of the nice things about that is once I get these ones cleaned, as I add subsequent functionality, it'll be that much easier to keep that subsequent functionality clean, because I'll have really good examples, good practices built out, and to continue to build additional feature functionality into the system. And so right now, I kind of considered the state of the Modern Apps project, Modern Apps Learning project, to be sort of like a 0.1 release. It's function. It works well. There's surprisingly few problems. We have usually several thousand people going through the site every month. Maybe a few dozen actually going through the processes and getting registering, enrolling for courses or earning badges and so on. And, they have a very small percentage that have problems. And so actually, works quite well. But I'm kind of thinking of this in sort of three phases. It's like the first being automated. Like right now, I think we have the ability to do a lot of things in an automated way. We can provision a new so if I want to create a new guide, or if I want to create a new course, or somebody else wants to create a new guide or a new course, we have automated workflows that help to automate, that will spin up a new repository with a template that is partially scaffolded for you. So if I want to create that guide, is a very straightforward process. So I think automated is in the same way as like somebody wants to enroll for a course, that's an automated process, right? But I kind of this automation is kind of like the first part of what the robustness that I would like to see in this. The second part is manageable. In my mind, I call it manageable, meaning that I have things like dashboards, I have things like alerting, and we're not there. Okay? Like there's dashboards and alerting that exist in GitHub pages. The challenge being is that we're going for a highly distributed design. I like that. And I want to build this system so that, because distributed is the new way of doing things, and the old way of, say in this case, we're talking about web applications and common web applications that we all work on. The old way is that, let's say a company has a website, they get a content management system, and everyone who has any web content related to mycompany.com, it all has to use the same framework. You've all got to log into Drupal or WordPress or Joomla or one of these things, and every single thing that needs to go in any one of these web pages, they've all got to fit into that same framework. And now the new way that web is headed, and the very cutting edge, is this idea of a headless content management, meaning we understand that most enterprises and modern large websites have a diversity of teams and departments and use cases and business units and so on, that may all need to have things that are represented in the mycompany.com namespace, right? Somewhere in mycompany.com/something, I want to have a page, and we may have standards that say, hey, yeah, these all need to look a certain way, and they may need to conform to certain standards. But does that mean everybody who's going to be building any type of web application has to do it exactly with Joomla and Drupal or whatever else? Or could a team potentially have their own tool set and their own framework to be able to create their own web applications and their own subsites? And so that's the direction of large web application management is moving in the industry right now towards this headless direction. I think most large enterprise sites today, by a long shot, are not headless. They run in traditional content management systems, but the new is a headless approach, and GitHub is great for that. And here we have, actually, when we go to Modern Apps Learning, the homepage is based on one template. The guide pages are based on a different template, and the course pages is different. And then there's the member pages. So if you're a member, you get a member page that's based on another template. Right? And in this case, they all happen to be Hugo templates, but there's absolutely no reason why they need to be. We could be using any number of different frameworks to create different page types that can exist under this Modern Apps Learning umbrella, and that it really has that very powerful benefit of being this headless content management. We can have different teams using different tools. Yeah, and it kind of aligns that whole overarching idea about one of the benefits that microservice architectures bring. You can use the right tool for the right job. If you have a different team that's brought in to build a particular type of web application component or web service or something like that, they can use their preferred tools, and it all can work together, quite nicely. Now, that being said, though, is we see the advantages of being able to be distributed are that heterogeneity and flexibility. Lots of flexibility. We can do whatever we want, but it comes at the expense of manageability, right? And so that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because we can see now in modern distributed systems, you can manage distributed systems well, but you have to have tool sets and approaches and processes that allow you to manage those highly distributed efforts. And so here what we need in terms of manageability, right? Every one of these different repositories, they all have a page for issues. They all have a page for pull requests, right? And that's a challenge, right? Because and no one's going to want to go through, like, over here we have 63 repositories, but if I go over here, we have another 695 repositories. So we've got, just about 760 repositories or so under management right now. And we're not going to be able to click through all of those to check to see if there's pull requests. And so at the most basic level, we have GitHub notifications, and GitHub notifications are actually very, very robust, right? For most people, these can be very, very effective because most people, not like myself, are not registered to over 700 and something different sites that they're watching closely. So and this thing, when you're a member of the community, you're not going to automatically be subscribed to have your GitHub notification watching all of the sites. You might have them watching your member page. You might watch a few other pages. We have a few. It'll be manageable. Now, for myself, or if there were anyone else who were to be an administrator over all this stuff, now all of a sudden you've got, and this doesn't include anything else that I'm doing. Just for Modern Apps, I've got alerts coming in potentially from, over 700 different sites, and so it becomes unmanageable from an automated perspective, right? And you can do things like mentions. And if I have different things automatically mention me, if I have too many @ mentions here from an automated, I can have a process to where when an event happens that triggers an alert, I could have it send a message that @ mentions me, that notifies me directly. But then this could become overwhelming. So right now I leave these to where if someone mentions me, it should come up into my mentioned filter here in my GitHub notifications. And the only time that usually happens is someone manually mentions me. So that way it's a little easier for me to notify. But what if someone opens a pull request on, repository number 412? Like, there's a notification that'll come in here somewhere, but it just gets to the point where you can only go so far using your notification panel as your dashboard, as your alerting system. And so I feel for myself, really one of the next big things we really need to do for the site. So as I mentioned, so I think we're already at this place. We have automated part one. Things are automated well enough now. There's improvements I would like to make to to these features that say right now I can automatically create a new course template, right? I can improve that, but it's pretty decent right now. So That one is not the most urgent thing, but definitely finding, creating a system for central alerting and handling of issue tickets and pull requests across all our repositories. That's a feature I'd like to get to. But it is an interesting thing, right? Because it does go back to, if we think about all the things we might want to do and we try to prioritize them, and once we start to get to the highest priorities, there's also that weighting by how complex, how actionable something is. As the idea of, let's say, centralizing alerting and creating dashboards is not trivial, right? And there's a lot of options architecturally about what tool sets and so on that we might end up using to implement those features. And so on one hand, it's a high priority to get that dashboarding, alerting, and centralized issue tickets, centralized pull request views. But it is also a complex project. So that one is a very high priority for me. And but on to the next thing. So we have that management. Now, once we think about the automation, right? We got the automation, and we got that manageability, monitorability, if you will, right? So we know when things go wrong, we can identify that information. The next thing beyond that, I think of is life cycle management, right? So we are far from life cycle management in a sense, in that, what do I mean by life cycle management? Well, we have all these distributed sets of templates, right? But these are not intended to be completely decoupled, right? They're meant, what if I want to introduce a new feature on courses, right? Well, quite often on courses, I mean, the general rule with this thing is that the features are local to the repository, or executed in association with each repository. And so let's say a feature to enroll in a course, right? Every course it keeps has a local copy. So let's just look at this intro Tanzu standard. Here's a course. And I go in here, I see GitHub, workflows, and look at this course user registration event, right? And that's a file that's sitting here locally within this course repository. And what happens is if I want to change, improve the user registration process for courses, right now, there's nothing in my automation that will have a way to centralize or automate, let's say, these particular features. Or what if I want to change the visual appearance? A great example, if we go to modern, well, I think we just saw it, right? So right here, you can see here, this one says Modern Apps Ninja Home still. Right? And you may notice the name Ninja, other than the domain name itself, is going away. If you go to our homepage now, and if you go to the latest version of the template, it no longer says Modern Apps Ninja. So, and that goes into that lifecycle management. I had a process to create this Tanzu glossary guide that scaffolded it one time. And I have a source template that I use that has the latest version. So on my guide template, it doesn't say Modern Apps Ninja anymore. I went in and changed that. And that means tomorrow or today, if I go create a new guide template, or if I go deploy a new guide, I want to create some new guide, it won't say Modern Apps Ninja anymore here in the label. But that making that change to my source template, it wasn't done. It doesn't do anything to my existing courses. And so we need to better leverage Hugo templating in this case, or other templating frameworks that we may be able to include in our overall distributed system, to where we can manage that templating process. And so fortunately, the frameworks that, web frameworks generally have a lot of, there's lots and lots of robust options for templating. And Hugo actually has some very good ways of being able to handle these, this type of templating. It's very robust. Now, it turns out, like, as I built the system, I was new to Hugo when I started, and so I didn't build it in the cleanest possible way. That being said, to bring our templates into conformance with make a really clean way of templating, to where if we want to update our common assets without interfering with the site local content, there's really nice ways of doing that. And so I need to go in and clean up our templates. And so we have about 10 minutes left, and I'm thinking, let's see, I see something in chat from Rick. Let's see. Author pointed. Oh, about a comment about version control. Okay. So yeah, so I think I'm going to continue a little bit on this planning discussion next week. I'm going to have a little bit more of the project plan built out. We're using GitHub projects. I already have some of those project assets about how we're planning this built out. I don't think it's entirely, it's going to be a fun learning effort that we can do together. I don't know the perfect way to do it, but we're going to plow through all these updates one way or another. One thing I don't think I mentioned is a criteria that is helping to direct us right now is that I am going to be going on paternity leave between late March, early April. You never know. Nature does what it does, right? But I'm going to be out for probably 4 months. And have other folks on my team who are going to help make sure that the site stays active and supported while I'm away. But my primary goal over the next up until I leave is to make things as clean and as manageable as possible before. And so on one hand, when we think about what happens if, on the bright side, the functions that run, they actually don't really have many problems. One of the really nice things about running your a lot of your features and functions on a CICD workflow system like GitHub Actions or other CICD workflow systems like that is that when someone wants to enroll in a course, it triggers an action where GitHub is responsible for spinning up a brand new, perfectly clean virtual machine that will handle one user's request. One user wants to enroll in a course, well, GitHub will spin up a virtual machine. They'll process just that user's request and then throw that virtual machine in trash can, right? And think about how empowering that is, how simplifying that is for me as the developer versus needing to write code where I have a server that might have to, within one common base of code, needs to handle thousands of requests, right? And I'm not saying that everything that you might need to develop could work in system B versus system A. But I am saying that, like, if you can do things in the CI/CD type workflow system where you have that ability to have a dedicated virtual machine or container built on a per run basis, that really can take us a dramatic simplification of how much effort you need to write in that code, because every single run gets its own unique snowflake, and it's GitHub's problem on how it's going to provision the unique environment for every single time that one of these features needs to run. But from my perspective, all I need to do is write the thing that gets to run in its own unique virtual machine for every single run, and that makes it way simpler for me. And it also means that even though a lot of the scripts that I've wrote are really very, very rushed and mediocre, that's why we have such a high reliability, because even though they're sloppy scripts, they're not running on a long running server that gets memory leaks and has to deal with handling dozens of thousands of different requests. They're running on a dedicated, isolated instance all by themselves, like unique little snowflakes. Okay, so yeah, so I will get a little more clarity for next week in the project plan on the exact order in which I hope to do things. So at the same time, one thing I didn't talk about yet is content. Content needs not go anywhere. And there's a little bit of chicken and egg, but it's one of the nice benefits of the platform at the same time is, on one hand, we need to release content and we have to update features at the same time. And, we only have so many hours of the day. Doing both of these is just more work. I've got to do update content and I've got to update features. One of the cool benefits of the platform, though, is if we do an update to the platform itself, quite often those type of updates can become content, right? Let's write learning content or a guide or a blog or a video about how I did this particular type of update. Oh, we want to refactor an old workflow. Hey, that's great learning material. That's why we're doing this to begin with. But it's one of those things, as we know, we all have to we all have I think everybody has a job, right? Where you have a job and every week you've got to say, hey, look what I did. Hey, look, I did this, or hey, I looked at that. And that's usually where the content, I get in my job, I'm more responsible for making sure that the content is available than I am for saying a new feature. And I said, the nice benefit is quite often if I want to create a new feature, that can also create new content. And so I can kind of kill two birds with one stone, but we've got to think about content. We've got some content now that needs to be updated. I think and then I have a couple new releases. We've got some new HOL guides that are out. And so we want to get some new companion courses for those. We're going to start updating things, moving away from like additions messaging. Some of the courses haven't been updated in a bit. So I need to get into update courses. And then of course, need to go through the existing workflows and refactor them. Need to figure out how we're going to get that some better centralized management and visibility. Because of course, when I'm out of the office, right? I think that's the first part, right? Making sure we've got centralized, a very clear dashboard. If something is wrong, if a user has a need or request, or someone's waiting on something, we need a dashboard that very clearly helps us identify where that is. And then at the same time, let's say somebody reports a problem. Well, how hard is this to figure out what the resolution of that problem is? And if I go into this workflow file and someone says, oh, someone has a problem, registering for this course, and I go through here, it's 211 lines when it could probably be 30 or 40 if it was just clean. And when you go through this, like, it's not well documented and the annotations are not great, but you can figure it out. But like I said, I bootstrapped this together in the middle of the night, 3 in the morning on like a marathon run to try to get this stuff finished, right? And so it's sloppy, and so if even for myself, if I want to come in here and be like, ooh, how does this work again? I got to sit here and think about it for a while, let alone somebody else who's never seen this before. If they're going to come in and try to support this, it's really unclean. And so I think beyond getting the centralized dashboard capabilities working right, next thing is probably to clean up these workflows and start to parameterize them. And then I think the third thing will be to get into that cleaning up our Hugo themes and Hugo templating to where, the great benefit of these Hugo themes is that they all have this really nice feature called waterfall, in which case I can build every single aspect of what appears on this webpage. Every single aspect of it can all be held in this directory called themes, right? And so I have in a place to put now, but when I want to customize things that are specific to this particular instance, in this case, this is the Tanzu glossary. And what is Tanzu glossary? It is a type of page that I call a guide page, right? We go to Modern Apps Learning and we see guides. And so I have a template that and a specific type for guides with certain attributes. And so these are guide pages. So I know what a guide page is, and I can have that in my theme. And then within each guide page, what's customized? We have the content customized. So we want certain things to be consistent, and we want certain things to be changed on a per repo basis. And so what we do here is we make sure all of our template assets are in the themes directory. And that's very 100% clean. And the local changes that should only be local are here. What that means is later I can come in and I can update that themes directory and keep that themes directory updated, and it will not overwrite any local customizations. So it allows me to continue to make updates to the theme template, to the overall site design, to be able to put in new features and so on by making an update to that themes directory and ensuring that any local changes for that have set up for a particular instance are preserved. And that's not a difficult thing to do with Hugo. One thing I just need to do is I need to go through and make sure that they're clean, because I think in many cases I might have some changes that I've put locally in this area of the template that should rightfully be in themes, and vice versa, and then having clear guardrails and guidelines and documentation about how to do that theming. So that brings us to the top of the hour. So that was good timing, I guess. I am not in a huge rush, so I can hang around and chit chat or ask you questions, but that will hopefully set the stage for next week. I'm going to bring some more detailed project planning and start to look at more specifics about how we're gonna do that initial. We need to create some content dashboards. Maybe we'll use some Tanzu Tanzu observability or Tanzu service mesh or for a couple things. Who knows? We'll figure out what we'll do for some of the creating some good, cool, centralized dashboards, maybe some Prometheus or Grafana or something. We'll see. I'm not certain yet, but I have some specific. I've been thinking about it for a while, so I have some ideas. I'll have some ideas put together for that next week, and we'll start taking a deeper look at that. And that's all. So any questions, conversation, hang out and chit chat. I don't have to run, so whatever you guys think. Oh, I see there is something, someone put something in the chat. Thanks. Oh, thanks, Eric. Thanks for joining. And let's see, Steve says +1. Awesome. Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and call it there then. And I really appreciate everybody joining, and we appreciate you taking time, and look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks, Art.
Thanks for joining.